This is Not Worth Living, a podcast that features creatives interviewing themselves with a preset list of questions. Unlike other podcasts that feel like conversation between friends, this one aims to feel like eavesdropping on a psychiatrist's visit. Today's episode features
B.R. Yeager. Would you open an envelope with your death date? Absolutely. I don't really see any point to not knowing, or a positive to not knowing. Even if it meant that my death date would be tomorrow, that would, really help me determine how I'm going to spend today. And if it's not for decades, it's just, I don't see how that wouldn't be useful. What keeps you motivated? To be real, probably just a kind of an overwhelming sense of inadequacy. I think it's not like particularly a healthy purpose for creating, but I think it's the honest answer is that I like to make things to feel a sort of purpose. And another side of that, I'm not sure if this is necessarily motivation, but when there's something that's really bothering me, I have a tendency to ruminate a lot on whatever might be going on in my life, or outside of my life, in other people's lives. I get kind of in a compulsive rumination brewing, and while the only ways to combat that or to nullify that is to write either about that or around the feeling of whatever might be bothering me at that time. So I think that that's the main reason why I work in art at any capacity. Who inspires you at the moment? So my very good friend, Adam Michael Kozak, who performs music under the name Burial Grid, a very good friend of mine. We've been close for the past 20 years or so. He recently completed the first draft of his novel, around 80,000 words. He's not someone who's tried writing fiction before at all. He doesn't unlike a lot of us, he didn't start off doing short stories or anything like that. He just had this thing that he was, driven to create. And it's about 80,000 words. It's really a remarkable piece of work. And I've been in the process of doing a deep edit on it. And a couple of things. For one thing, it's just incredibly impressive that it's the product of someone who doesn't have a background in writing. It's a really interesting, really powerful piece of work. The other thing that has really been inspiring about it is, the degree to which, as a rough draft, how rough it is. It's one of those things where, all of the elements are there. A lot of it just, either needs, pruning or needs to be shaped a little further. And a piece of that is that, so I've been, focusing heavily on writing fiction for over 10 years now. And when you're starting out, for me at least, it was very easy to be kind of raw and do kind of weird things intuitively, and then over time you develop habits, some of which are positive, some of which not so much, and it gets kind of there's this one tricks point never quote from a recent interview talking about how the better that you get at something, at any form, creating any form of art, the harder you have to work to be wilder and free within that form. And I've been feeling that pretty hard in terms of trying to get sort of back to a kind of naive state where I feel like I was doing some things that were exciting to me because I didn't really know what the hell I was doing. And so in reading and editing Adam's manuscript, it's been cool because I get to see things that he's doing intuitively that I don't necessarily think are coming from, any particular piece of craft advice or anything like that. So he's kind of like intuitively striking upon these cool things. Another piece of that is that it is also in this like very rough state. And he really just kind of like put everything on the table, put every idea down. And, in contrast, I'm working on my next novel right now. And I get into these like bad habits of trying to make everything great from the get-go. And so whenever you try to do that, you end up inevitably getting stuck or working at a molasses pace. So this has been like a really big inspiration and a really great reminder that, be messy and rough with it early on. Like just put everything down. Don't worry about how it sounds. Don't worry about making it beautiful. That, it's, for me, I think for a lot of people, fiction and writing and prose is a fix it in post kind of thing, or at least that's how I do it. I kind of think of myself as a better editor than a writer. And I work best when, I just kind of scrawl whatever without any care and then figure out what works and how to shape it into something that works later on. So that's been really cool. Is there a quote or motto that you work by? So I've talked about this a bunch before, but a guiding principle for me has been don't explain anything, especially when I'm writing horror stories. I think a common thing in horror, either movies or in fiction, is that they tend to fall apart once you get to the part where everything is being explained, when you're finding out what's really going on. Like, especially now, this is like such a cliche thing to say, but I keep on seeing it everywhere, is that you go through, a movie or whatever, and, you get to the end and you find out, the ghost was actually my repressed trauma, or the monster was actually, my feelings about this, insert your own allegorical thing here. And that always just tends to ruin it for me. I think, it's much more potent and much more interesting when it's just left up to the audience's interpretation. That's always how I prefer it. I like to not know. I like to not be sure. There's nothing less scary than being certain of everything that's happening. So I mean that's not exclusive to horror either. I just think things are much more interesting when it's a conversation, when art is a conversation between a artist and the viewer. Is leaving spaces for a reader to fill in their own gaps, to come to their own conclusions. Which is frustrating for some people. Some people want to have their suspicions confirmed. It's been interesting, I've had some people, tell me, it's like, I just don't get like what happened in negative space or something. And, I've asked, is like, well, what do you think it had happened? And, what they will say is pretty much essentially what I had in mind. So it's even if people don't think that they get it, they do end up getting it. But there's that tension there of not knowing. And I think that's really powerful. I think that's the magic of any art. So, I try to hold true to that. Would you be friends with yourself? Probably not. I'm not a very interesting person. I tend to kind of fall into the background. I think I've misrepresented one aspect of my work. I've often said that all of my work is based off of things that have happened to me, or things I have experienced, and it's based on things that happen around me. I don't know. I'm much more interested in other people and other people's experiences and their perceptions, and how they view the world, as opposed to sort of my own mindset or my own perspective. And a lot of my writing is around the idea of people I don't necessarily understand, and trying to find commonality with them. Which isn't to say that I'm not necessarily in my, there's obviously it's inevitably my perspective. But it's me trying to break into other people's perspectives and understand other people's tendencies or behaviors. So yeah, not for any like super negative reason, but I don't think I'd find much to hang out with myself. I hang out with myself enough as it is.